When The Terminator was in production back in the mid-80s, it first sounded like just another B-movie in the making. A science fiction plot on a shoestring budget, a special effects artist turned director in James Cameron, coming off his first film, Piranha 2: The Spawning, and a still fresh-faced bodybuilder turned actor in Arnold Schwarzenegger, who mostly had bit parts in films before starring as the titular character in Conan the Barbarian. When The Terminator was eventually released on October 26, 1984, it perfectly blended the low-budget feel of a B-movie with a fascinating plot involving artificial intelligence and time travel, and beautifully executed practical effects that brought this unique world to life. And despite a few dated effects, The Terminator still stands as one of the best science fiction films of all time, with themes that make it feel more relevant today than ever. With the unexpected success of The Terminator, Hollywood did what Hollywood does best by churning out another sequel 7 years later, T2: Judgment Day. James Cameron was back to write and direct, and managed to accomplish the same impossible feat he previously did with Aliens, by making a worthy sequel that was every bit as good as the original, while also feeling unique. I broke down the elements of a successful sequel in my previous video, The Day Alien Died, but I'll briefly reiterate what James Cameron was able to do not only once, but twice. Give the audience something new. Identify what worked and build off of it. Change the stakes. Play with expectations. Add new, memorable characters. While there are a lot of similar beats that play out in both films, T2 still felt fresh because Cameron was able to honor what came before it while also going off in new and exciting directions. An obvious and proven way to make sequels feel unique is to switch up the overall genre. And once that decision is made, it trickles down to smaller, creative decisions in order to make the movie genre appropriate. That's what worked so well in the Alien franchise, as Alien was more of a claustrophobic horror movie, and Aliens was a larger scale action movie. And that's what Cameron replicated with the first two Terminator films. When conceiving the idea of the Terminator, James Cameron was inspired by Michael Myers in Halloween, and Yul Brynner's gunslinger character in Westworld. Both villains were terrifying, unstoppable forces of nature, and that's what James Cameron wanted from the Terminator in his science fiction slasher film. But in order to not retread on tired ground with T2, James Cameron made more of a straightforward action movie, with moments of levity sprinkled throughout. James Cameron is responsible for two of the best sequels in film history because he knows how to balance honoring the past while also venturing into new genres, themes, and character arcs. And at the conclusion of T2, it appeared that the story was perfectly wrapped up. When talking about Terminator 1 and 2 as a completed narrative, co-writer of the first two films, William Wisher, said, "We finished the story, and as far as I'm concerned, it should stay finished. Everything we had to say about the Terminator has been said." One of the things Jim and I talked a lot about was whether there should be another follow-up, and we made our decision in the way we wrote Terminator 2. There are no back doors in this film. We wrote this movie so that the fat lady sings. And that should have been that. But again, Hollywood is gonna Hollywood, so of course more sequels were in the works without James Cameron's involvement. I'm not involved in T3. I think films should be made from an organic place of, I have a specific story to tell, now I'm gonna figure out who's ready to pay for that. It was 18 times harder to get the money to make Titanic than it ever would have been to make another Terminator film, because that was a proven commodity. But I was much more interested in Titanic. And I think that's the way films should be made. All of the four sequels that have come after T2 as of now have their own issues. Terminator 3: Rise of the Machines is basically a carbon copy of T2: Judgment Day. Terminator Salvation broke the mold, which was refreshing in itself, but the entire movie was a big dull dud. What made the first two Terminator movies so scary was that the villain looked just like us. It was able to hide in plain sight and come for us, disguised as our friends and family. In Salvation, they're all faceless villains with zero personality. And after spending multiple films building up the legend of John Connor as this amazing resistance leader, John Connor was reduced to a boring, do-nothing character who mostly yelled into walkie-talkies throughout the film. In comparison, the character of Marcus discovering his true identity and searching for humanity made for a much more interesting character. It's really indicative of the film's overall mediocrity that the most memorable part of it isn't actually any moment from the film itself, but the infamous behind-the-scenes rant by Christian Bale.
Am I gonna walk around and rip your fucking lights down in the middle of a scene? Then why the fuck are you walking right through? Da-da-da-da like this in the background. What the fuck is it with you?
In an attempt to reboot the series, the fifth installment, Terminator Genesis, delivered a plot so convoluted with an overuse of time travel that it not only required the characters on screen to halt forward momentum in order to provide expository dialogue, but it also erased the events from the previous films as though they never took place.
You are nothing but a relic from a deleted timeline.
For some inexplicable reason, James Cameron gave the movie his stamp of approval.
I feel like the franchise has been reinvigorated, like this is a renaissance. If you like the Terminator films,
Run!
I'll be back.
you're gonna love this movie.
Except there actually was a reason, it turns out, which Cameron confessed to years later. I think it's fairly wide known that I don't have a lot of respect for the films that were made later. I was supportive at the time in each case for Arnold Schwarzenegger's sake because he is a close friend. He has been a mate of mine since 33 years ago, so I was always supportive and never too negative. But they didn't work for me for various reasons. In 2019, the rights to the Terminator franchise finally reverted back to James Cameron, 35 years after the initial release of the original Terminator. With a producing and story by credit, James Cameron and the rest of the creative staff released Terminator Dark Fate on November 1st, 2019. It is without a doubt the best sequel in the franchise since T2 Judgment Day, but it's also the day Terminator died. Dark Fate picks up right after the events of T2, thereby expunging Rise of the Machines, Salvation, and Genesis completely, and I had absolutely no problem with that. The Halloween franchise did this recently to a great deal of success, as the 11th installment made itself a direct chronological sequel to the original 1978 Halloween, wiping out all the other movies in between. Plus, wiping out 3, 4, and 5 helped clean up a franchise that had become marred by overly complicated and contradictory timelines. The best parts of the movie were when Linda Hamilton and Arnold Schwarzenegger were on screen together. Their strong dynamic picked up right where it left off. But there's a flip side to that coin. Their chemistry has already played out across multiple films. This was an opportunity to introduce new, interesting characters, and they didn't. Which leads me back to the elements of a successful sequel. Add new, memorable characters. Grace felt like just another version of Kyle Reese, with a few interesting powers and weaknesses, but not much personality or character arc to make her overly engaging. And Danny was built up as this new John Connor, but for a majority of the movie, we just watch her react to events around her as opposed to taking action herself. She's swept along the story by Grace and Sarah's choices. Again, she doesn't seem to have any apparent skills or personality traits that make her interesting to follow. Identify what worked and build off of it. Just like Alien 3 before it, Dark Fate committed what I believe to be one of the cardinal sins of sequels by completely undoing what came before it in the opening minutes. For the Alien franchise, it was watching Newt and Corporal Hicks struggle to survive throughout Aliens, just to watch them get killed off screen in the opening seconds of Alien 3. For Terminator, it was watching Sarah Connor do whatever it takes to protect her son, John, throughout T2, just to watch him get killed off by another Terminator in the opening minutes of Dark Fate. I understand that this kind of creative decision can help push the franchise in a fresh new direction, but it feels like such a slap in the face to the fans who were emotionally invested into what came prior. The entire motivation and stakes for Terminator 1 and 2 was to keep John Connor alive at all costs. Every struggle and loss we watched the characters go through was for that sole purpose. But then once John Connor was flippantly killed in the opening minutes of Dark Fate, it didn't erase the first two films from existence, but it called into question their purpose. Did it all even matter? Which leads me to my greatest frustration. Change the stakes. The stakes have always been the same in the Terminator franchise. Save John Connor. He must live to become the leader of the Resistance. Without him, the machines will win and humanity will fall. It became repetitive after the first few movies, but at least they were consistent. But then, by killing John Connor in Dark Fate, they didn't change the stakes, they completely removed any semblance of stakes. John Connor growing up to defeat Skynet was then replaced with Daniela Ramos growing up to defeat Legion. And by doing this, they basically said that nothing matters in the Terminator franchise. No one is worth saving, and no organization is worth defeating. The machines will attack, and a human will rise up to lead the resistance. Kill John Connor, and Danny will replace him. Kill Danny, and someone will replace her. It's all inevitable, and so nothing matters. This version of time travel is referred to as fixed timeline. Characters can change small details, but the big events, the ones that have the largest impact on the future, cannot be altered no matter what the characters do. So, Terminators can be sent back in time and characters may die or destroy Skynet, but Judgment Day is a fixed point, as is the Machine Uprising and the Human Rebellion. It's going to happen. After movie, with the exact same beats playing out, the Terminator series desperately needed a dose of originality. And I think one of the most frustrating aspects of Dark Fate is that there was an interesting original movie already in there, if only the writers had chosen to focus on it. A vengeful Sarah Connor devoting her life to hunting Terminators with the help of the very Terminator that killed her son, who now has a family of his own and is seeking redemption and forgiveness. That is infinitely more interesting than just another retread of the same tired beats. It could have played out in a similar Western style that Logan did, except, Terminator. Or maybe Carl. T-800? You get the point. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes a simple shift in genre can create top-down creative choices that ripple throughout the rest of the film in order to adhere to genre convention. But instead, we were given the same formulaic beats that we've seen time and time again. For an indication of audiences' growing apathy towards the franchise, you don't have to look any further than the underwhelming box office returns. Off a $180 million budget, Dark Fate underperformed with an opening weekend of $29 million. James Cameron was supposed to breathe new life into the franchise with apparently 2 more sequels already planned, but with a lack of new, exciting storylines and plummeting box office returns, it appears that this franchise is finally terminated. Sorry, I had to. This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare offers thousands of online classes for creatives looking to either kickstart or hone their craft. Classes cover topics including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. Now that we're at the beginning of a new year, I'm looking for new and exciting ways to grow Entertain the Elk, including creating a podcast, but I had no idea where to start. Fortunately for me, Skillshare has the class How to Make a Podcast by John Lagomarsino. His excellent class walks through each step of the podcasting process, from creating the concept to launch and then promotion. If you've been putting off your own creative pursuits, make 2020 a year where you explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity with Skillshare's online classes. Skillshare is incredibly affordable, especially when compared to pricey in-person classes and workshops, with an annual subscription costing less than $10 a month. And right now, clicking my unique link in the description below will give my viewers 2 free months of premium membership. So stop what you're doing right now, sign up, and start exploring your creativity.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like it, share it with a friend, and also leave me a comment below. Tell me the day you think Terminator died, or tell me if you think it's better than ever. If you haven't already, please subscribe below, and also click the bell below. I've had some subscribers reach out recently asking why they aren't getting my videos even though they're subscribed, and that's because YouTube has changed their model. They're not necessarily going to show you my videos even though you're subscribed, but clicking the bell below will ensure that you're notified whenever Entertain the Elk drops a new video. So again, do that right now. I'm so excited to launch into a new year with new content, new ideas, so I hope you come along for the ride, and I really hope you enjoy the next videos that I have lined up in the future. Thanks again everyone for watching, and I'll see you all next time.